Boy Restaurants in Cleveland and Akron are pleased to be a presenting sponsor of And Then We Ate.
I'd like 2 fish, chicken melon grilled chicken sandwich and a fry.
Food. It's the one common denominator we all have. We eat to live. Nowadays, we tend to eat out and eat quickly. But it wasn't so long ago that our eating habits were very, very different. Eating was central to our lives, not so much because of what we ate, but rather the traditions that surrounded our meals and the people with whom we shared them. Our fondest memories of family, of neighborhood, of community are marked by the foods that accompanied them. We lived our lives together, and then we ate.
How could you have a first communion or a birthday or a wedding in Cleveland without a cake from Huff?
Lawson, they have French onion chip dip, and it's the world, in my opinion, and my family's opinion, the world's best French onion chip dip. There is no better.
Love the Big Al.
Euclid Beach popcorn balls. I mean, you talk about, I can close my eyes and feel the crunch of those on my teeth right now. Man, that's living.
My dad would take us out to the Stricklands out by the air dock, and that was just always such a treat.
Charles chips, they are the best chips in the whole world.
Oh yeah, oh, Miller's, sticky buns. You bet.
I miss walking into the house and smelling those great aromas.
I remember eating footlongs and closing my eyes as I ate them because they were so good.
Back then, before we even sat down to eat, our neighborhoods and the families within them played a much greater part in our lives.
Well, you definitely had a sense of neighborhood. We got our fresh vegetables in the summertime from vendors who came door to door.
There was a man who would come by with a wooden wagon and a sway-backed white horse, and he would come up and down the street. The street we lived on, 120th off Buckeye, was paved with brick. So you could hear the clop, 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 and you'd hear him call out.
Berries, strawberries, 2 quarts for a quarter.
And my mother and all the women on the street would go out and go over the produce from the cart.
Things were brought to the family. The family was the anchor. It was there. And it was from that anchor that occasionally you'd send your emissaries out to go to the store and bring something back, or other people brought their goods to you. But the family was physically situated. It was an anchor. I don't think you can say that anymore about American society.
Can you remember the clink, clink of the milk bottles being delivered in the morning? It was from the neighborhood milkman. He wasn't just a salesman, he was part of our family, and we knew we could rely on him.
5 o'clock in the morning, every day, right on schedule, rain or shine, snow or sleet, you'd hear ching, 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 ching as the Meyer dairy man carried the glass milk bottles in that wire basket up the walk. And I almost think that auditory cue meant it was a specific time. You knew that it was time to get up.
Milkmen would get up by 3 a.m., head over to the dairy and fill up their truck with all the orders they had for the day.
And no matter the weather, there would be some of these women out to greet him, bringing the milk either before it froze or before the sun got to it. But always with a good hello. There was a rapport that people don't have today. It was really wonderful.
The milk trucks were always fascinating to neighborhood kids because the milkman could actually drive them standing up or leaning against his seat. That's so he could make a quick exit to drop off his wares and get on to the next house. Milkmen could make good money if they were good business people who picked up more homes on their routes through fast, friendly service.
The milk truck guy was our friend when we were kids, and so he would always let us get in the milk truck and ride up and down on the street. That was cool.
We had a milkman, Walter. He was nice to the kids. He always had a biscuit for the dog.
He wanted to be a milkman because it would enable him to make people happy, bringing them milk and butter and cream.
The whole attitude of people was different in those days. We used to walk into unlocked houses. Some of the houses we had keys to get in and put the milk right in the refrigerator. I remember one time I walked into a house to put the milk in the refrigerator, and there was a gal ironing. She had nothing on but a pair of panties and a halter. She said, well, put the milk in the refrigerator. I stood there aghast. She told the regular milkman when I come the next day, she said, you never seen a scared guy like him running, a big guy like him run out of here.
I miss a throwback to the old neighborhood days where your doors were always open. Just the safety and the security of knowing that you don't have to worry. And when you smelled something or you heard something, you knew that that treat was right around the corner. Those were easier, softer times.
Life definitely changed. There's more of an emphasis on efficiency and productivity, and not as much on personal service and a warm smile and a handshake.
In 1934, when we started, there was 243 dairies in Cleveland. That's a whale of a lot of little dairies. Today, there are 3 dairies in the greater Cleveland area.
We also took advantage of new technologies and conveniences in and around the home. That great invention, the refrigerator, made it possible to cancel home delivery and go get the milk ourselves. We just hiked up to the corner store. Depending on where you grew up, the names would be different, but not the experience.
Akron was full of neighborhood grocery stores. In my little neighborhood, for example, a block and a half away was an Acme store, a Witt's Market, which specialized in fine meats, and a Square Deal, which was a depression-generated store chain.
Our neighborhoods were a maze of small mom-and-pop stores. There were drugstores, food markets, fruit stores, creameries, bakeries, and butcher shops. They were all family outfits, often with the store out front and the family home upstairs, and they were all nearby.
It was like 2 doors away. So as I recall, we shopped there almost on a daily basis.
And at the time, it didn't seem all that strange. Dad was gone all day with the car, and any place we had to go, we had to walk.
On Thursdays, all the women went shopping. They took those shopping carts, and they went to each individual store. It was an adventure.
The ones that I recall would have decades of store fixtures and things just sort of layered over each other, almost archaeologically.
Butcher shops that had sand dust on the floor, and you could smell the smells in every store. You know, we are so pristine today. There are no smells anymore. What happened to the smells?
He knew all the women in the neighborhood. Anybody who walked in there, he'd call them by name and he'd say, hey, I've got a nice roast, or you remember the chicken I gave you last time? How was that?
That's not exactly the experience we get at the big box mart or the supermarket, so it's a pleasant surprise to still find a store where it's more than just a place to buy stuff. If you venture down the road just a little past the Cuyahoga County Fairgrounds, you will find Schaff's Grocery Store in Berea, a family operation for more than 100 years.
This store was built by my grandparents around 1901. I grew up here with my grandmother from the time I was probably 8 or 9 years old. People didn't do their own picking of groceries out. You had to get everything for them. They would come with a list and they would tell you they wanted 5 pounds of sugar, and you would have to go get 5 pounds of sugar out of the sugar barrel and weigh it out, and so I would have to do all that.
It's like Loretta's Schaff's has just stopped in time. It's just the way that it always was 50, 60 years ago.
She has to take some kind of certification for that assisted living that she's doing.
Oh, yeah. The whole street was a social occasion. Shopping was a social occasion. It was a way to meet people walking up and down the street. and it reflected the tempo of the community. I don't care whether it was a Polish community or Slovenian or Jewish or Italian. The street belonged to us. It was our own particular place to be. Whoever thought of leaving? It was our own special place.
We not only stayed in our neighborhood, but when it came to mealtime, we usually stayed at home.
I hear talk about Silver Grill and some of the fancy restaurants, but I remember in the working class neighborhood, that was not the way we lived our lives.
That wasn't something that was done on a regular basis because a lot of people couldn't afford it.
My mother, who is now 82, still hates eating in restaurants. She doesn't trust them. She thinks that they're doing something in the kitchen that's not good. So we never really ate in restaurants much at all.
My father used to say, you know, listen, I buy food every day, so we have food in the refrigerator. I'm not going to buy more food when we go out to eat. He says, so most of our meals were at home.
Oh, no, 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 no. We never ate out at all. My dad had eaten out a lot when he was young. When he married my mom and discovered she was a good cook, there was no need to go out. So, you know, even if my mother would hint that she wanted to go out, he'd say, why should I go out for a meal? I have the best cook right here.
Those meals at home were for the most part simple and good, what we now call comfort food.
Typically meat, potatoes, and bread.
Roast, pot roast, chicken.
Spaghetti and meatballs, roast beef and mashed potatoes, kibasi and sauerkraut.
It was pretty traditional American stuff. I mean, I thought it was, we never said we're going to have soul food. I mean, we just had food.
It was just what we ate, you know. I didn't know better. I didn't know if it was fancy, not fancy.
There were just some foods that we never ate. I remember we didn't eat mayonnaise because mayonnaise spoiled and you could die. We didn't eat cream puffs because the cream could spoil and you could die. We didn't eat mushrooms, same reason. Fast forward to today, we really like foods from all cultures, whereas 50 years ago, you just ate what your parents ate.
A generation or two ago, American families were more than a third bigger than they are now, according to U.S. Census figures. Slightly bigger families plus leaner times, so the food had to stretch further.
Typical meals at home when I grew up had meat in the form of stews or other types where meat was cooked with something else to stretch it, to make it more flavorful, where somebody could take a lesser cut of meat and pound it for an hour or two and cook it for a few hours and make it very flavorful.
What we call ethnic food today in the old days was poor man's food in a sense. It was what people could afford to eat, what they knew from the old country, which was not necessarily of the best living conditions. That's why they came to America.
For some in the African American community, these foods came out of slavery times where the plantation owners were eating high on the hog.
The choice cuts, the shoulder, the ham, high on the hog. The lower pieces, the snout, the nose, the feet, the entrails, the chitlins, they were the lower points on the hog. And that was kind of what the throwaway stuff.
In the mid-20th century, cooking for a family was hard work. People survived without microwaves and convenience foods.
Produce was a mainstay of people at that time. Nobody thought of prepared foods like bagged produce or anything like that.
Everything was made from scratch. You didn't use Jiffy Mix. I don't even think Jiffy Mix was around then.
Oh, absolutely. Everything was made from scratch. Oh, absolutely. Prepared foods, that wouldn't allow them in the house. My dad was particularly incensed at the thought of Cheese Whiz. Oh, never. My hard-earned money, Cheese Whiz? No way.
I mean, I have incredible memories of Sundays or any night where my mom would cook, and or you'd come home from school and you'd walk into the house and you'd smell all the great aromas of food that had been cooking all day, or like marinara that had been on the stove for 18 hours. Because most of the things my mom cooked were peasant foods, you know, that cooked for a long time. They'd be in the oven for 4 to 8 hours. I think Northeastern Ohio food is predominantly Eastern European in influence. You know, I think we're known for pierogies. We're known for, you know, fish fries, which is a very European, Eastern European thing. You know, I think that bratwurst, things like that.
In terms of ethnic foods, I mean, the two things you have to talk about are either sausage in some form, you know, whether it be Italian sausage or kielbasa, you know, you've got to have that because every culture's got it. You know, and they're all great. And dumplings are, I think, because you've got pierogies, you've got ravioli, you've got pelmeni, you've got all sorts of, almost every culture has a sort of dumpling with, you know, meat or cheese in it. And that's a hallmark. Yeah, that's like, I think that's like one of the universal foods that every ethnic group has.
Churches and ethnic halls were important for keeping the nationality communities together. Around the holidays, the churches and the ethnic halls will have their ladies auxiliary group get together to make donuts or noodles or specialty breads and pastries for the holiday. And throughout the whole process, they're singing hymns.
But there was one area tradition that your humble narrator and others might have had a hard time singing about.
City chicken. You know, I remember a lot of city chicken. Didn't really like it, but we had a lot of it. A few years ago, we took a colleague to a restaurant here in town, and one of the specials that day was city chicken, and he's like, "What is this?" And the rest of us looked at him like he was an alien. Like, "You don't know what city chicken is?" And he's like, "You know, explain it." We're like, "No. If you don't know, we're not going to explain it. You have to order and eat it." There was absolutely no chicken in city chicken. Very cheap. You could sometimes get with like pork in it and veal and everything but chicken. I mean, it was like, you know, city chicken was like the other white meats.
And I take a bite, I'm like, "This is pork." And he goes, "Yeah, I know." I'm like, "Then why the hell do they call it city chicken?" Why don't they call it city pork?
Turns out that chicken used to be more expensive than pork. So pork and veal were disguised as chicken, with the wooden skewer helping the cheaper cuts of meat as they impersonated a chicken leg. Back then, we just weren't as concerned with the details of what we were eating. Mom bought it and cooked it, and then we ate.
I don't recall there ever being any concern whatsoever about, you know, all of the fat. We ate pigs, we ate steers, we ate steak with gristle was the best part. In my family, the bigger you were, especially as a boy, the better it was, the better sign that you were big and strong and would be able to handle anything that came up in life.
I would say it started turning around when the family got the second car and Mama got wheels. She started running for food and so forth.
But some of that running would still be to stores with a neighborhood ethnic feel.
Aleshi's. I love Aleshi's. We used to go there and they would be taking that Italian bread out of the oven, and I always got yelled at because from the time we left the store to the time we got home, I ate like half the loaf of bread. And my dad would be in the front, "Quit eating the bread! I'm not eating the bread! Quit eating the bread!" You know? So what it evolved into is we would then buy 2 loaves of bread.
And then there was the biggest neighborhood market of all, the West Side Market.
As a kid, I was surrounded by food. It was a marketplace. I'd never seen so much food before, and it was all sitting out and so different than a grocery store. For me, it seemed like miles and miles of food. It was an adventure for me.
I like it because, partially because you can hear people arguing. Fresh apples, fresher apples, really fresh apples and cheaper. Just outdoing each other. I like the variety of smells and sounds and almost anything you want. It's the flavor of Cleveland. Every nationality is there.
Many of our customers originally shopped with my grandfather. Nothing is prepackaged. Things are cut to your order. And we feel this is a real service to the citizens of Cleveland.
Most of us began to give up the personal touch in our grocery shopping. While some groceries retained their family connection, others sold, even by their name, a new emphasis on self-service.
In the late 40s, self-serve was an idea that was catching on in grocery stores, but people didn't like the idea of pushing the cart through the store, and so the store owner hired models or actresses to push these carts through the store to give people the idea why yes, I could push my cart right over there and load it up with vegetables.
There was something impersonal about having to search for your canned goods or for your cereal in this big store.
Impersonal or not, the supermarkets grew in popularity, forcing many mom-and-pop corner grocery stores, bakeries, and butcher shops out of existence. Then something interesting happened. The small corner stores returned, but mom-and-pop didn't run them. Corporations did, and they were called convenience stores. The company that formed the model for this new phenomenon in Northeast Ohio was started in Akron in 1939 by J.J. Lawson.
They pioneered the gallon jug of milk at a very low price.
Mother and Dad said that was a very good deal financially. With the Lawson's Milk Store, there was one on East 105th Street, and it had that big sign that hung out and the big milk bottle on the side.
They focused more on a lot of dairy products, ice cream, a lot more just quick convenience foods, because I think it was still a new concept then. If you needed something quick, don't go to the grocery store.
Quickness and cheaper staples like milk and bread weren't the only things that endeared Lawson's to thousands. People loved their butter pecan ice cream, chopped ham, fresh sliced bologna, and yummy stuff like pimento loaf. But it all pales in comparison to a new food invention.
They have French onion chip dip, and it's the world, in my opinion, and my family's opinion, the world's best French onion chip dip.
And I think that was the first time I ever tasted dip for chips.
My mom was always good at Easter baskets. We'd get toys in them and we'd get some candy, but we always got 2 bags of chips and 2 tubs of the Lawson's chip dip, and that was the highlight of the Easter basket. That's what we ate. It wasn't the candy, it was the dip.
Believe it or not, you can still slather your chips and palate with this wonderful concoction at Lawson's successor, Dairy Mart. It's in their dairy case and still called Lawson's Chip Dip. It'll take you right back.
Roll on, roll on, roll on. I do remember it quite well.
Now, if you were a baby boomer or older and lived in Northeast Ohio in the 60s, you probably took a number of televised rides on the coolest mode of transportation ever. Yep, it's a tank truck express we call the Big O. She hauls Lawson's fresh squeezed orange juice nonstop from Florida.
It was just one of those marketing things. It was well done. It was catchy.
Can't remember the jingle, and I'm just frankly too embarrassed to sing it if I could.
Love the Big O.
No, I can't even recite any of it.
Roll on, Big O.
Get that juice up to Lawson's
in 40 hours. I remember being awed by the fact that they were driving for 40 hours with that cold Florida juice in the truck. It made me want that juice so badly.
I don't remember it enough to sing it.
One man sleeps while the other man drives.
When I was a young kid, I was thought, man, I wish I could drive that big old truck. My buddy would drive, I'd go in the back and sleep.
And the cold juice in the tank truck.
Fresh as the Florida sun.
Fresh on the tree they stay, then we pick them and they squeeze, and we squeeze just as quick as you please, and the Big O leaves the same day. I can remember that, but I can't find my cheeks.
Da-da-da-da-da. I can't remember the rest of it.
Is that it?
No.
Could be your big break.
No. It could also put me in the loony bin. Well, it was roll on, Big O, get that juice up to Lawson's.
It's in 40 hours.
Coming up, some have called him the greatest chef in the world. He came out of Northeast Ohio, and he lives on cans in your cupboard. Plus, we'll take you back to one of the best dinner dance clubs in America, Cleveland's own Alpine Village. And Then We Ate continues. But first, take this time to...
Big Boy Restaurants in Cleveland and Akron are pleased to be a presenting sponsor of And Then We Ate.
When we were growing up, we were probably still eating most of our meals at home. And then when we did venture out, it was usually to a neighborhood place. Like the small grocery stores, butcher shops, and bakeries before them, neighborhood restaurants usually reflected the tastes and traditions of the local community.
You knew what neighborhood you were in by the food that was served.
It'd be 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. We would stop at Solomon's, any one of these small delis, and pick up a hunk of salami and buy some bread and just take it outside and eat it. Or if we had enough money, we would sit there in the deli itself. The deli was a source of community for many, many people.
My mom loved barbecue. She still does today, and so do I. There was this place called Whitmore's. The sauce was just delicious. It was just great sauce.
I thought everybody ate barbecue ribs. It was not until the Rib Fest, all of these Rib Fests that they have in Cleveland, that I began realizing a lot of people had never had barbecue ribs outside of the black community. I was raised with a rib bone in my hand.
Rib used to be a nighttime food. In most of the places, they didn't start their rib cooking until in the evening and at night. Then we started setting them early in the day.
Herb Williams is Hot Sauce Williams. In fact, there are five brothers who opened Hot Sauce Williams Restaurant in 1962 as a family venture. Only family would work the kind of hours with minimal return that a neighborhood restaurant required.
Everybody had a second job. They earned the family living by working their first job, and they would spend time at our restaurant without pay.
On Cleveland's west side, barbecue might mean something else completely. The Shoreway landmark we now recognize as Don's Lighthouse Inn, or Howard Johnson's before that, was originally built in 1928 to house Poshke's Barbecue. In addition to its tasty barbecue beef or pork sandwiches, the restaurant was affectionately described as Otto Poshke's temple to the lowly weenie and hamburger. Reflecting some of Cleveland's European roots more closely, there were several restaurants no longer here where locals ate. Hofbrauhaus on East 55th, Kiefer's on Detroit near West 25th, and Old Austria in Rocky River. But when it came right down to it, at least until 1961, there was one European-inspired restaurant that had no equal. Herman Perchner's Alpine Village was right in the middle of downtown, and everybody went there.
It was absolutely unique. There was nothing like it, perhaps in all of America.
It was one of those places where everybody went to if you went to Playhouse Square. It was the place after the theater. It was the place for the shop party. Perchner brought entertainment. He brought opera. It was an extraordinary experience, I think without parallel in the city's history. It epitomizes a time and a place that will not reoccur.
Through NBC broadcasts, the whole country knew that the Alpine Village was the dinner dance theater in America.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Across the nation, we send you the dinner dance program. Your host, Mr. Herman Perchner. We're at the Alpine Village in Playhouse Square, Cleveland. Our musical director, Mr. Frank Strawker.
The mastermind behind it all was Herman Perchner, a German immigrant whose family's restaurant roots date back to the 14th century. Perchner's other ventures included an earlier Hofbrauhaus restaurant on Euclid Avenue and a major role at the Great Lakes Exposition of 1936 and 37. The Expo, known for its spectacular aquacade show, boasted a temporary, larger version of the Alpine Village restaurant that Perchner had begun on Playhouse Square years earlier. After the Expo closed, the Alpine Village at Playhouse Square continued and prospered.
I opened the show nightly carrying 55 steins of beer. I piled them up like a pyramid. And then I get another beer drink. I would carry 20 steins and slide across the dance floor, a baseball slide, and then jump up without spilling a drop, well, hardly.
It's really a part of this city when the city was arguably at its peak in its heyday. in the years just after World War II.
Perchner's formula was simple but effective. Good food and drink and highlights of the classics.
There was variety artists, but the signature piece was a medley of songs from either a musical comedy, an operetta, or even an opera.
What was special, he was a showman. Elmer was a showman. There was nothing in Cleveland like it.
Perchner's engaging personality was icing on the cake.
I don't know if Herman mentioned this. It was when he would interview the brides-to-be, and he had a magnificent routine. It was terrific, and he did it so beautifully, so nicely. He would do the same thing every show, and it never got stale.
Because I would ask the bride some mildly embarrassing questions.
If you were going to be married or have a baby, you know, you had to go to the Alpine Village and get involved in that ceremony.
And frequently here at the Historical Society, people will come in and they'll give us their family papers, and there's that picture taken at the table at the Alpine Village with the little frame around it.
For Herman Perchner, his guests were more than just customers. He touched their hearts, but they also touched his.
The love you get back is when you see people have fun, when you see them enjoying themselves. That is what we want enough.
It was not just going in to get a meal, it was going there to be part of Herman's family, if you will.
A place like Alpine Village was built around providing memories. It was a meal, it was an evening out, it was theater, it was entertainment, and he provided a personal touch. Everyone, it seems, who's ever eaten there or recalls it mentions the man behind the restaurant as well. I think someone like Herman Perchner and his Alpine Village restaurant exemplifies what a restaurant can be to a city and its people.
It's a business that demands a lot of time and love.
Other family-run restaurants thrived across Greater Cleveland. In Lakewood, Ruby and John Miller ran a place universally known for its sticky buns.
Miller's was truly the most wonderful place in the world. And the first thing that would happen would be the roll lady would come with the tray of rolls. They would take your order, and then the roll lady would come again. You take two more. It was a brown sugar yeast roll, rolled up, incredible. And just before dessert, I kid you not, the roll lady would come back.
On East 9th Street downtown, there was another family-owned place, an Italian restaurant owned and operated by the Brigatti family for 74 years. Located in the parsonage of a Lutheran church demolished long ago, it had a unique twist.
New York Spaghetti House had an ethnicity all of its own, owned by an Italian gentleman, and he had all Yugoslavian waiters. They had the tables with the checkered tablecloths. The spaghetti was absolutely superb. He had a sauce that still nobody duplicates today.
And of course, everybody talks about how the waiters would always memorize things and people would try to trip them up and all that by changing orders, and they never missed.
Everyone was treated as if they were the most important person in the world.
It was that kind of service and food and atmosphere that affected people's lives in a big way.
It was dark, so we had the little candle on the table, and we had a glass of wine, and we ordered our spaghetti, and when they brought the spaghetti, Mike looked over at me and said, "Hey," and we both said, "This is just like that scene out of Lady and the Tramp." And we started to laugh, and I knew that I was going to marry him. And apparently he had the same thought, because 4 days later on our second date, he proposed. When the Spaghetti House closed, it was almost like a death in the family. It was just that kind of personal loss.
Akron also had several well-known Italian food families. Giacomini's began in the 1930s as a small room in the home of Mom and Pop Giacomini. Papa Joe Giacomini had a reputation for making everyone who ate there feel just like family. In honor of that, it evolved into Papa Joe's. Or how about the Cirillo family and Luigi's?
The same family's owned the restaurant since 1949, so over 50 years.
And the customers appreciate that consistency.
It's always the same, whether they're 6 years old when they came here with their parents, or 16 on their first date, or 26 when they bring in their little baby.
Besides its family feel and award-winning pizza, Luigi's on Akron's North Main Street has another claim to fame. Funky Winkerbean eats there. Sort of. Tom Baddock and Chuck Ayers, the creative team behind Funky, eat there, and because of them, even if you've never stepped foot into Luigi's, it just might look familiar to you. That's because Luigi's is Montoni's, the pizza parlor where Funky works.
Bit by bit, I started stealing pieces of Luigi's for Funky, and so we finally taken the whole place. You know, we've got the paintings on the walls. They have an artist putting them on, and we've got the Tiffany lamp by the register. We've got the bandbox.
Tom brings me the scripts, and we look over the scripts after we've had lunch. It's like research anytime we're here. On those days when the storyline that Tom's given me revolves around Montoni's, you know, there's just no doubt about, you know, where things are going to take place and what they're going to look like, because we're here, we're doing it, and something happens behind the bar and I go, oh, yeah, that's what it looks like, okay, yeah.
It's not just the surroundings that find their way into the strip. Whole storylines can mirror life at Luigi's.
Some things that happen in the restaurant, the computers especially. And I've always wondered about that one-armed waitress coming back to eat.
It seems fitting that Montoni's would hail from Northeast Ohio. We've been blessed with a rich Italian restaurant heritage, including the landmarks that grew up on Murray Hill in Cleveland's Little Italy. Cleveland is also the place where Chef Hector Boiardi made his mark. You know him. He's the smiling face we see on today's beefaroni. He was a real person and a real chef. He even catered President Woodrow Wilson's wedding. In Cleveland, patrons at the chef's many restaurants love Boiardi's spaghetti sauce so much they often ask to buy some to take home. He also started pre-packaging spaghetti dinners to take home. It was a thriving side business for Chef Boiardi, and a legend was born.
My first job was at Monaco's, Chef at Boiardi's place. Chef Boiardi still made the spaghetti sauce. And he cooked the spaghetti sauce for the whole week or whatever we needed. And then we used some of that sauce and put it in jars, quart jars, put the label on, and we sold them to the customers for carry out. Very pleasant gentleman. I liked him very much.
Chef Hector Boiardi, an Italian immigrant who made it good in Cleveland, and now his make-at-home food ideas are known around the globe. The Chancellor of Italy was so impressed with one of the chef's classy Cleveland restaurants, he called Boiardi the world's greatest chef. The downtown dining scene also sported favorites that were a little less formal than where Chef Boiardi made his name.
When you would go downtown with your mom for shopping and you were bored out of your skull, she would treat you to a frosted malted at the stand underneath the escalator in Higbee's basement. You'd have to practically tilt the glass over your head to get that last dollop of frosted malted into your mouth.
We would shop at the May Company, and we'd go next door to the old Kresge's, and we would always get the hot dog with the sort of steamed chopped onions on it and orange drink.
After shopping at May Company, Higbee's, those places, and Woolworths and Kresge's, we'd stop at the Forum. It was a cafeteria, and we loved the strawberry shortcake. That's what we really came for.
One of the places we did go for the holidays was the Silver Grill. For Christmas, we'd go to the Twigby shop and the Silver Grill. And I go back to the time when they saw the wooden stoves. It was just an ideal way to spend the holidays.
Downtown had several other places that made an impression, even if the food seemed to take a back seat.
Captain Frank's was a place that I mostly remember just because of its location. It was wonderful. You could sit there on the lake, and there weren't that many places that were right on the lake.
There were always sailboats and motorboats in the water, and you could
drive right up to the dock, you know, and get off and get into the restaurant. It was a wonderful place.
Our favorite was the Kontiki in the Sheraton Hotel on the corner of Public Square and Superior. And that was just a wonderful restaurant, very, very Polynesian in decor, and the food was exotic, the drinks were exotic. Oh, how romantic it was. And then the waterfalls. I mean, it was a special place to, you know, 17, 18, 19-year-old.
I miss the East 4th Automojas. You order something, the waitress would call the order to the guy in the window cutting the sandwiches. I mean, it was the perfect, you know, bar restaurant ambiance. When the real Automoja, the original Automoja, opened that restaurant, it was right across East 4th, which essentially is an alley, from the Euclid Avenue Opera House. And he was right across from the stage door. And so, you know, after a performance, all the actors and actresses and performers would come across to his place. So every square inch of the place was covered with photographs from the vaudeville era.
All these restaurants were one-of-a-kind places in a time before restaurant chains became the norm. But there were some restaurants successful enough to branch out, and Cleveland had a few notable ones. Clark's had been a Cleveland tradition since the turn of the century. Even noted food critic Duncan Hines had given Clark's his thumbs up.
Going to Clark's, the Yorktown at 117th, that was a big deal. Or Stouffer's downtown, or a Clark's downtown. That was eating.
We liked Clark's. There was a Clark's at Shaker Square, and it was great to go there. And again, not so much for the food, but they had the treasure chest at the end. And if you were a good little boy or girl and you did a real good job cleaning up and didn't make the waitress too nuts, you could go to the treasure chest after your meal and go pick out a little toy.
Another Cleveland top choice was Stouffer's. Growing from a small stand-up lunch counter in the Euclid Arcade, Stouffer's restaurants were east, west, and at several locations downtown, including one of the grandest views of the entire city at top of the town.
That's where we went for dinner at the senior prom. Somebody told me that if you slipped the maitre d' a couple of dollars, you could get a seat by the window. And I tried it, and you know, it worked. The guy was laughing at me the whole way because I think I gave him like $1.50.
Stouffer's restaurants were known for good, solid fare in semi-continental styles. For some, the food was secondary to the classy atmosphere.
Don't ask me what any favorite was. It was just a big deal to be in a big city and having a meal in a fancy restaurant.
We caught up with a former Stouffer's hostess who, in a recent building renovation, recognized the faded remains of Stouffer's Playhouse Square dining room murals, one of the elements that added to the restaurant's classy atmosphere. The murals hail back to a day when Stouffer's was a prime player on Cleveland's local dining scene.
They came for reputation. Everybody knew the Stouffer the quality was always going to be the same. It was probably the most active downtown dining room at that time. The waitresses always were looking so clean and crisp with starched aprons that just literally stood out like sheets. And they always had a big bow in the back that during inspection before the dining room would open, the hostess had to make sure her bow was tied just correctly and up and sticking up, and so just like military soldiers.
If you develop standards, quality, and operation of number one, why not repeat it in other restaurants?
Coming up, roll up your jeans and grab your leather jacket because we're heading out to Kenny King's and Manners. Plus, we'll remember a special drink named after this local TV legend. And Then We Ate continues.
Transportation and how we eat and where we eat is the crucial part of the equation. And of course, what opens the whole thing up is the phenomena of the automobile. And you know, driving to dine, it exploded, if you will, in terms of people going out to eat after World War II. I mean, there were about 600 restaurants in Cleveland in the late 1920s. In the mid-1990s, there were over 20,000 restaurants in the region.
As more Americans took to the road, a new way of eating started to develop.
At a drive-in, you stay. You know, The car is off, you're sitting there, there's a tray attached to your window, and the whole family is sitting inside eating and dripping ketchup all over the upholstery.
Drive-ins. The commercial concept of eating in your car first started in warm weather states like Texas and California, but right on their heels was Northeast Ohio.
Akron had perhaps the highest per capita automobile registration of any substantial city in America during the 1930s and 40s. In other words, we were wedded to the automobile. And that meant that people had the means for getting to a drive-in hamburger stand or frozen custard stand.
Akronites especially took to the drive-in concept for a couple of reasons. Akron did not have much of a public transportation system because the hills and valleys of Summit County made it difficult for trains and buses to get around. And the workers in the tire factories were making good money and could afford cars. But drive-ins appealed to all of us. It got us out of the house, and we were able to get a meal without much fuss or money. A small restaurant in California saw this trend and jumped on the bandwagon after World War II.
The original McDonald's actually were drive-ins. They had car hops.
But they soon discovered that they could save money by having customers get out of their cars and come to the counter to fetch their own burgers.
You had the Golden Arches, and then you had the building itself was striped, red and white stripes, like the American flag. And you just ordered, and there were little areas you could sit on the outside, but you couldn't really go in and sit down.
I remember original McDonald's, yeah, it was not far from Euclid Beach. Again, there was no sit down, you just went in, and I think the burgers were 15 cents or something like that, and maybe the cheeseburgers were 20 cents.
But all those burgers made big money. They started their rise before World War II, and today Americans buy about 5 billion hamburgers a year. Tapping into the burger wars of the past were chains that offered cheap eats and lots of them, like Columbus-based White Castle, whose slogan was, "Buy 'em by the sack." A local knockoff chain of White Castle was Royal Castle.
Royal Castle was like, cool. I mean, that was it. Because they were very inexpensive.
And they were these small hamburgers that you could maybe eat them in 2 or 3 bites.
But you had to have the Birch beer. You had to have the Birch beer with the Royal Castle hamburgers. Better flavor than root beer.
I tipped my first waitress at a Royal Castle restaurant on 13th and Chester. I thought she looked like Haley Mills, so I left her a nickel. I was 6 years old at the time.
Alongside the inexpensive burger chains was a local restaurant that elevated the burger to an art form.
But a Mobby's burger with grilled onion and a milkshake was heaven. It was nirvana.
Mobby's was a small, family-owned chain on Cleveland's east side known for big burgers.
They made these incredibly juicy burgers that hung over the edges of the bun. And they would load them up with pickles and fresh raw onion, and they smelled so good. You couldn't not go in there. It would just suck you right in through the door.
Everybody remembers the orange onions. Well, they would load them up with paprika. And they were a color orange that doesn't appear in nature.
Unfortunately, a Mobby's burger no longer appears in the present either. But let's check out a couple of places in Northeast Ohio that still make some of the best cheeseburgers in the country. We're heading back in time to the dawn of the drive-in. Most of those original drive-ins have disappeared. Not so in the Rubber City. The Skyway and Swenson's drive-ins have both been around for more than half a century, and they continue to thrive.
Skyway in high school was the big hangout, and cars would just circle around the parking lot. You know, streams of cars, they just circle around and flash their lights and honk, and they have great French fried mushrooms and great burgers.
Car hops, actually came out to your car and, and served you food. And it just it being really, and nothing against you, Swenson, it was just so greasy, and that's just so good.
Skyway and Swenson flourished with a drive-in business model that was in vogue when a burger, shake, and a hot car meant true happiness.
Friday and Saturday night, especially Friday night after the games, the football games, we would have so many kids, the lot would be so packed to where we had to have a minimum on what they had to purchase.
We had car hops. They were on roller skates. I can't imagine that would ever work, but yeah, it was just a typical American graffiti scene.
Sky 2 and 1, Fry 3.
The Skyway and Swenson chains are proud to have restaurants at their original locations.
If you look at the old photographs of this place, although the building was entirely different, it used to be what looks to be an above-the-ground wooden structure. It's sitting on the same footprint that this current building is sitting on.
Part of the reason both chains believe they've prospered is lots of running.
People get much faster service. They're able to wait on more people in the same amount of time. And it's also kind of a show, and people can just, I think they kind of come in and look at people actually working hard.
Some of them think we're a little crazy, but some of them like it. The big question is, you guys have to run like that? And we're like, yes, that's better service. Thank you. You guys have a good day.
It looks more professional than walking. Everybody's running, and in this way, you know, they get to the customers faster.
I think the family business is still very viable because I think they're just a little closer to their customers. And they get feedback a little sooner and a little more accurately than the large chain.
That's one of the reasons that I have stayed here so long, is because it's a family-owned business, and we try to treat all our employees as a family.
Family atmosphere, secret sauces, the Sky High, the Galley Boy. Their reputations stretch across the country.
The Skyway in Akron, I mean, it's not only is it just good hamburgers, but it's notable because Jimmy Buffett, you know, the author of Cheeseburgers in Paradise, actually mentioned it in the booklet that comes with his box set as one of the best cheeseburgers to get. I mean, you can't have a better testimonial than that.
Unless it's the New York Times food critic who chose Swenson's as one of his 10 favorite restaurants in America and said, "Behold, America's best cheeseburger." It's a delicious dilemma for customers to consider.
Well, they mostly just come, show their cars, see their friends, and talk about cars and new tires, new wheels, I guess.
When the weather's right, hundreds of people show up at Annabelle's in Mentor. Young and old, they commune with their classic cars and the comfortable food that creates new memories for some and wonderful reflections for others.
The diner was in Euclid, originally Kenny King's, on Euclid Avenue and Gilley Road. And we moved it out here about 18 years ago and started doing the car cruising thing.
These folks have fond recollections of great area drive-ins. But for many, the memories are strongest for Kenny King's and Manners.
A waitress would come and she would lay that tray, and they would hook it right to the window of your car some way or another. Hook it right there, and you would eat right off that tray. And, you know, you'd be with your best girl, and, you know, everything was just going just great. I mean, you're in love, and you're eating good, and you're at Manners.
I remember Kenny King's being nice to love. They had great milkshakes, great onion rings, Big King hamburgers. Yeah, they had very good food, very good onion rings.
People like Kermit Pike really enjoy this era of the muscle car and great burger joints because he not only cruised, he raced, but they always ended up back at home base. For Pike, that was Manners.
They wouldn't pull in straight in, they would back in, and then there'd be 6 or 7 cars in a row, and in many cases they would have trophies, and they might put their trophy on the hood of their car if they wanted to show off a little bit.
Manners and Kenny King's were born in Greater Cleveland in the same era. Manners in 1939 and Kenny King's in 1944. And there really was a Bob Manners and a Kenny King. They were fierce competitors.
Oh, we were contemporaries with Manners. As a matter of fact, Manners was the one to beat for Kenny King. And I remember hearing stories of how they would gather in meetings, and, you know, Kenny would get them all together and say, "We just got to beat Manners." So, you know, they had the Big Boy sandwich. We, of course, had the Big King sandwich.
But Manners and Kenny King's were each unique in their own way. Manners had the nationally franchised Big Boy sandwich and all the promotion that went along with it.
I don't necessarily remember the food. I remember the Big Boy comic book with Dolly and Nugget and Big Boy, and kind of following the continuing saga that would happen in the comic books. I love those stories.
But Kenny King had the nationally franchised Kentucky Fried Chicken. You know, with Colonel Sanders. Or was Kenny King the chicken guy?
So when I was in my early 20s, I was working at an insurance company, and they sent me to our California office to do training. And again, I had never been away from home, so I go out there and I'm dying for fried chicken, and I ask for a Kenny King's, and nobody had a clue what I was talking about, and that's when I realized how big the world was, and it was really Colonel Sanders. It wasn't Kenny King's.
But for many people, Manners will be eternally embedded in their psyches because they cut a deal with the master of late-night Cleveland TV, Ghoulardi.
Does this program go to Parma? What is that?
Manners I remember because they used to have the big Ghoulardi. It was a milkshake that was blue.
I remember that Manners Big Boy had Ghoulardi promotions, and they would serve hot Ghoulardis and cold Ghoulardis. And I remember making my folks take me to Manners so I could get a cold Ghoulardi. And it was a blue milkshake with orange whipped cream and a green cherry on top. Why a blue milkshake? Get sick, turn blue.
What do you think of the movie so far, huh? Hey, really bad.
Superman, I don't understand. This is a fat man, color him blubber. This is Ghoulardi's pet dog, color him hungry. This is the end, color it finished. Oh, you want me to stop? Well, that's what I like, a good, strong signal.
Coming up, we'll grab a booth and have some of the best ice cream in Northeast Ohio. We'll show you where you can find some sweets that haven't been seen since LBJ was president. And when it comes to remembering food, two simple words reign supreme: Huff Bakery. Grab a fork and get ready to savor some choice memories. And Then We Ate continues, but first, take this time to call. Euclid Beach Park was a place for families, food, and fun. Mom and Dad would treat the kids by taking them there, and dozens of area companies and schools would treat their folks by giving them an all-expense-paid day at the park.
Once a year there was the Richmond Brothers picnic, and Aunt Rose and Uncle Steve worked at Richmond Brothers, so we always got invited, and that was great.
The popcorn balls and the candy kisses were just to die for. I mean, I could eat those candy kisses till the cows came home.
Oh, you bet. Oh, of course. That was one of my favorite things. I used to OD on the popcorn balls. It was something that you looked forward to, obviously, almost as good as Christmas.
The Humphrey family is still in the business of making memories with the same great Euclid Beach food, just like their great-grandparents did.
My great-grandfather and his family were in the popcorn business back in the 1890s, and they had the popcorn concession at Euclid Beach Park, which was opened in 1895. And he wound up buying the owners out. And he had a couple of horse-drawn carts all over around Cleveland, Public Square, and a little hole in the wall in Public Square where Dillard's was, till it closed. I guess it's Ontario and Euclid it would have been the corner of. That was at the turn of the century.
While the recipe is virtually the same, new technology has helped speed the process a bit. This machine is one of only two that exist in the whole country.
I remember seeing the popcorn. I remember seeing Laughing Sal. I remember the kisses, candy kisses. Just took me right back to the original Euclid Beach.
When you saw that machine turning that taffy, that it would just, it would stretch that taffy. And we kids with wide eyes would look in that big glass window and see that candy being made as they were pulling that taffy. And you could smell it as soon as you got in the neighborhood of Euclid Beach, soon as you pulled into the parking lot. When you are 12 years old, I'm telling you, that's heaven.
It is a special recipe, but it's straight out of a cookbook back in the 1800s. We started making the taffy back in the 1800s. We don't know who came up with the recipe. We don't know where it came from. We just know it's the same one we've been doing. The candy kisses are identical. There's no doubt about it. They're dead the same recipe, same machines pulling them, same machines wrapping them. The only thing different is the guy who's actually stretching the candies.
Turns out that local hero Bob Hope took a guest turn at taffy pulling at one of the Humphrey stores. Today, the resident Humphrey taffy puller is Tom Dickerhoo.
Well, the taffy starts in the kitchen. We boil it to 280 degrees. It's sugar, water, vinegar, and cream and butter. And once we get it up to 280 degrees, it turns brown, and we put it on a cooling table and cool it. Once it's cool, we put it on this puller over here, and it turns white again. Then I take it off there and stretch it, put it on this table here, and run it through the machine. Most of the taffy you get other places is a saltwater taffy. This is not a saltwater taffy. Saltwater taffy stays soft. Our candy gets hard, and then when you put it in your mouth, it softens up. And we only make one flavor, which is vanilla.
Now, when it comes to candy, there were plenty of other childhood favorites.
They have the chain to put around your neck, the necklace that you eat off of. I used to like those when I was little. And the lipsticks.
Dots, the colored dots, probably would be very close to bottomless Turkish taffy, and I will stand on record as saying that I have never been beaten in eating the dots. I have a technique in which you take it and you wrap your finger around and it's like eating corn. I'm undefeated. I am the mushmouth Mariano Puccetti of the candy dots eating.
When you start talking about candy, most folks have a few favorites that they feel are the holy grail of confectionaries. People long to taste some of the sweets they devoured when they were kids, thinking that their special treats are in the dustbin of history. But wait a minute, Cleveland's B.A. Sweeties specialize in the sugary treats that'll take you right back to the 3rd grade.
Everything from the wax lips to atomic fireballs to the nickel nips, which are the little wax bottles with gunk in them. This is a pack of Beeman's gum. That along with blackjack and clove. This is the most asked for item that is not made on a regular basis.
Candy buttons, that's the little dots on a strip. Slowpoke caramel suckers, Necco wafers, wax-filled sticks and bottles, Mary Jane's, candy cigarettes. Gotta have candy cigarettes. Politically incorrect, but you know what? It's part of our childhood. Clark bars, Zagnut candy bars, BB Bat suckers.
Then there was Sky Bar. It was 5 different candies in one bar. You had vanilla, you had chocolate, who knows what else was in there. It was sweet, we didn't care.
Sky Bar, Clark's, and Zagnut were regional specialties, available only in the Midwest. Beeman's Gum and Lifesavers were actually invented here in Cleveland, and so word has it, was Sweetest Day. Had enough sweets for now? How about something salty? Charles Chips were delivered right to our doorsteps.
I think it was the can, you know. I don't know, it felt like they were special because they would come to your house, you'd get them in the big can.
Boy, when that fresh can of chips arrived, man, I can still smell the inside of that can when it was empty. You know, that grease.
There's just nothing to beat Charles Chips. And they would only arrive, I think, once every month. And it's a good thing because we'd wolf down the can within a day.
When yours truly was a kid, yes, that's actually me as a kid, we were the only family on the street to get Charles Chips delivered. So when the truck pulled up, I was the most popular kid on the street. And then when we needed something to wash down the chips, Cotton Club or the ever-popular Little Tom's hit the spot. Another popular refresher was a malt from the neighborhood malt shop.
In the 40s and 50s, we had the malt shop. People went there to dance and have fun, and that's where a lot of our people coming into the parlor have their memories of the malt shop and meeting their friends.
One of my old favorite restaurants was Draeger's. I used to go there. I had a sweet tooth, and I had a friend who lived nearby, so it didn't get any better. We'd hop on our bikes and pedal up there. Their hot fudge sundaes were to die for. Friends and I would go in there, and we would usually just get an ice cream cone, but we were a little overwhelmed by all the pink fluff and candy displays and things like that. But now when I look back at it, I just think it's just such a fun thing to recall.
What Draeger's was for Cleveland's east side, Malley's was for the west side. When Malley's moved down the street to its current Lakewood location, it also made history as the first ever all-aluminum retail store in America.
The first time I walked into Malley's, I was just in awe. It's still magical when you walk in. They still have that back room that is set up for the kids with the big picnic table.
Our love affair with ice cream has a long history.
America and ice cream have grown together. From serving ice cream to our troops in every war, from the Civil War on.
Back in 1921, people coming into the United States were given ice cream at Ellis Island as an introduction into the United States. Some of the people from the Eastern European countries didn't know how to eat it. They were trying to spread it on bread back in those days.
By the 1950s, in the heart of Cleveland's Playhouse Square, the ice cream not only tasted great, it was a visual treat as well.
Every Sunday had a different colored dish of beautiful dishes.
He had Heron Sharon, Lover's Delight. He had Temple of Love, Coffee Fiesta, all kind different names he created. Everybody thought there was like in Vegas, because there was so many colors and so many beautiful lights.
Buccare's was one of the most delicious places, and they were the most innovative of all the ice cream parlors around.
Buccare's went beyond offering food. They also shared some food for thought.
My husband made that. Most of the teachers used to take the kids down there, and they loved it. So they had it in every school.
With its personal touch, stylish decor, and a great location in the heart of Cleveland's theater district, Buccare's was a downtown institution that suited every occasion.
Party after the graduations, everyday lunches from the people downtown. Most of the people who came from California, movie stars, or some they came right to the restaurant because it was next door.
The Buccares struck up a close friendship with performer Danny Thomas because of their mutual support for the nationally known St. Jude's Hospital for Children. Thomas made frequent visits to Buccare's on Playhouse Square, as did other stars who were appearing in Cleveland. Even the Beatles made the pilgrimage to the shop on Euclid Avenue to enjoy the unique sights and tastes of Buccare's.
The Beatles were in town, and they all took the dishes with them. We gave them the dishes. They ate out of them. They signed the napkins for me, and one woman bought it just to have it. I said, please. She bought it for a couple of $100 just to have the signature. So it was a good time down there.
On West Market Street in Akron, there's a place named after Mary Coyle. Today, Michael Tricasso, whose parents also ran a Mary Coyle store, carries on the family tradition.
This place was opened in 1937 in the middle of the Depression. It's kind of depression-proof. These are the same tables, the same milk dispenser, the same fountain, the same candy counter, banana bowls, the original. It's in a bowl, and we just stack the ice cream up, and there's a pint of ice cream. We haven't taken any flavors off. We've only added.
Or maybe it's custard you had a taste for.
My dad would take us out to the Stricklands out by the air dock, and that was just always such a treat.
After I got a car in 1937, it was a place to stop. Of course, the street was a great parking place, too, by the airport.
Coming here with my parents, my dad, and the family on Sunday afternoons after a baseball game or something, that was really special.
Strickland's was started and founded by Bill Strickland and his wife back in 1936. He was an employee of the Akron Pure Milk Company. He created a formula for a creamy custard. With the invention of the airport and the air dock here, pretty much settled at this spot, and ever since it's taken off and been very successful.
No, I don't think it's changed much. Same. They still have a Verner's sign over there. That thing's been there for years. Most people don't even know what Verner's is.
Besides the taste, there's something else that's special about ice cream. Buying and eating it at a special place like an ice cream parlor is a social occasion.
Oh my God, that's big. It's marshmallows.
Everyone has memories of eating that ice cream cone in the right place at the right time with the right person.
We sure had lots of incredible ice cream places to choose from. But we were also blessed with wonderful bakeries, from the neighborhood mom and pops to the larger companies like Love's, New York, and Davis, who would fill our neighborhoods with the marvelous smell of fresh baked bread, cookies, and cakes. However, when it came to bakeries, there was one name that stood out among the rest.
T.S. Eliot, the poet, has a poem, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and in that there's a line that I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I think in my family, and maybe a lot of Clevelanders could say that we measured out our lives in Huff Bakery cakes. I have a whole string of photos taken from the time that I was probably 2 or 3 years old until adulthood, me blowing out the candles on Huff birthday cakes, and my sister can say the same thing, as can my brother.
Oh, please. I loved Huff Bakery.
What we have here is your traditional Huff Bakery worker's cap.
Huff Bakery to me was the bakery in the neighborhood. For me, it was a multitude of different items, but the one that stands out the most and the ones that friends talk about the most was the Huff white-on-white birthday cake. We always look forward to choosing the piece out of the Huff birthday cake that had the most flowers.
It was plain white cake, like silvery white cake. It's not real grainy, and it has this white frosting. When my husband Tom and I got married in Pittsburgh, I made my mother-in-law search every bakery in Pittsburgh until she could find one that just was close to what they used to make at Huff.
Archie Garner worked at Huff Bakeries for a quarter of a century. Today, he still duplicates some of Huff's specialties. And the most requested item?
Mainly the white cake. That's the most popular thing that Huff did, and they did, then it seemed like millions of cakes a week. I think the busiest season they had was graduation. And I remember at one point, Huff had closed the orders for the whole month of June. They didn't take any orders at all for the month of June. And one Saturday, we had like 1,500 cakes for Saturday, that one Saturday morning. Huff was the largest of its kind. Huff had at one point had 130 to 140 stores in Northeast Ohio. And catering, they dominated catering.
Huff Bakery's mushroom pie, that was delicious. That was really great. And my sister-in-law used to get them often and serve them at her parties.
The decorations on a Huff cake were truly artistic. So to be one of their cake decorators, you had to have talent and earn your position.
At Huff Bakeries, we had a year's apprenticeship. You would start as an apprentice and learn how to write, do borders, roses, but you never did it actually on a cake. You would do it on, you would frost a pan and then learn how to write on the pan rather than on a real cake.
Even the way Huff boxed up their goodies and tied them all up with child-proof string was memorable.
The string was important because it prevented young children from getting into the box before their mother wanted them to get into it. But everything was wrapped up very neatly, and it wasn't just one little thin string. It was several wrappings around.
Huff Bakeries, which took its name from the street on which it was located, was the handiwork first of Lionel Pyle, then his 4 sons, and then a corps of dedicated employees.
You know what was special about Huff? It was like a family organization. There was a lot of families that worked there. Like, I worked with my mom. She trained me how to decorate. Everyone seemed to treat each other as family, you know? We all worked together, and we did a really nice job.
My grandmother raised me, and she was always in the kitchen when she wasn't working, and I was always behind her. And she would always show me how to do certain things, so I always liked cooking. And the chance to work in a bakery was like going to school for me. Next best thing to going to college.
Family and good food just go together. Whether it's a family that grew to be an institution, a family that's still dedicated to creating quality foods, or the members of your own unique family, it's the people and events that surround our food that make it precious.
It was the love that you put into it and the care that you put into it and the eating it together that was important.
It's the hot dogs at the ballpark. It's the custard or the French fries at Euclid Beach. And it's that association, and that's what people like to remember.
I tend to remember restaurants more by the people I was with and what we talked about and the occasions that we went there for rather than necessarily the food.
There's something about good conversation over good food. I think they just go together. When you go to a dinner party, the food may be good, and it usually is, but it's the conversation that I think you remember.
We lost the community of eating. We lost the slow aspect of eating. We lost what eating should really be about. It's not just to sustain you. It's about the social aspect, and I think we've lost a lot of that.
Knowing that you're in a place where someone has invested a lot of time into making a really great meal just for you. Food is the thing that binds us all together. So you start building a bridge between somebody's history and your own, and then passing that new thing on to your kids or your friends. That's an opportunity.
An abundance of food means continued life. It means prosperity. It means the family is going to survive. And sitting down at a table with the family to eat, if one sits at a Seder, or if one is at a Christmas dinner, or if one is at a birthday, An abundance of food is just incredibly important. It celebrates life. Food is life.
Food and life. They've always been together. And these stories remind us of the value of a time when we gathered together. And then we ate.